Gallant was breathless, panting through gritted teeth. His body ached, the pads of his feet burning with each step, and his mind weighed heavily with spiraling thoughts. He didn't know how long he ran, or even how much distance he had covered. His eyes kept to the rushing river, frantically scanning its depths for his brother. Lightning bolted overhead, the rain creating thick layers of mud underfoot. In his rapid desperation, he felt his back paw snag, sending him crashing to the muddied earth with alarming momentum. He fell forward, the impact knocking the remaining air from his lungs. The last thing he took in with his glossy blue eyes was the raging river, which had mercilessly swallowed his brother whole. And then there was darkness. Hours passed before he regained his senses, slowly finding his way back from the abyss. For a moment he thought himself dead, darkness encompassing him from every angle. It wasn't until several minutes passed that his eyes were able to adjust, taking in the silhouette of trees. His ears had also managed to pick up the sound of water, and it was then that he had become totally aware. He forced his legs to stand, though their trembling urged him to lay back down, to accept defeat and succumb to the darkness. Still, limb after aching limb he rose, demanding his body to surrender to his will. Once he was on all fours, he stood, testing his stability. He had somehow managed to keep himself upright, but another sensation now redirected his attention. His coat was heavy, the fur caked with mud and terribly matted. He knew he smelled, even if his nose had weakened over the years. The amount of rain and dirt was sure to cover him in heavy, earthy scents, but this was insignificant to the horror that loomed over his conscious mind. His brother, the one that he had so often cursed and slandered, was gone. Gallant had judged and mocked him, doubted and challenged him, and in the end, Illicit had still sacrificed himself on his behalf. Every feeling that swept over his frame was a torturous mixture of guilt and disgust. He was angry with himself for holding such bitter contempt, for often wishing that Illicit would just disappear. The universe had granted him exactly what he wanted, and he hated himself for it. It was difficult for him to make his way back to the den, the fear of his family's rejection clinging to his thoughts like a terminal illness. He didn't know how he would explain any of this to his parents, to Lovelorn, who was likely still hurting from their previous encounter. It was no debate, at least in his mind, that she had always favored Illicit to him. As much as he insisted it were out of pity, he knew better than that. The one wolf she cared about the most, he had single-handedly destroyed. As he came to the clearing, he was met by Bandit, who lay restlessly in front of the den that Love had been recovering in. At seeing Gallant, he stood up, his eyes round with worry, and the guilt Gallant felt caused knots to form in his stomach.
Gallant, where have you been?
He didn't answer, unable to find the words to speak. He didn't want to tell him what had happened. In fact, he was afraid that if he muttered these words, he would break down beneath the weight of them.
Gallant!
Bandit insisted, his tone rising as he pushed Gallant for an answer.
Gallant
hesitated, the words once more stuck in his throat. He had to force back the grief that threatened to consume him. The truth was going to kill him, but it had to be told.
I went after Illicit.
Illicit? Where'd he go?
Another wave of guilt, and Gallant had to force the words from his mouth.
He went after those bastards that attacked us.
He did?
Bandit questioned, now looking past Gallant and tipping his head.
Well, where is he? Did you lose him?
He couldn't look Bandit in the eyes, his head lowering so that he could focus on the rocks between his feet.
I didn't lose him.
The cryptic way he was answering made Bandit incredibly uneasy, and he felt his heartbeat quicken with anxious anticipation.
Then where is he?
He stumbled on the words, fearing the answer to his question.
He's gone.
Gone?
The white of his eyes rounded, the shock and confusion evident.
You mean they...
He stopped, not wanting to finish the statement.
No, we never made it there.
What do you mean? What happened to Illicit?
Gallant, where have you been?
The concerned voice of his mother, Junie, interrupted them, and he could see little more than the emerald hue of her eyes on him in the darkness.
Where is your brother?
It had been hard enough telling Bandit what had happened, but confronting his mother was almost unbearable. The fact that Illicit was adopted never influenced the love of his parents. Illicit was as much a son to them as he was, whether he liked it or not.
Mom.
Gallant's voice sounded defeated.
Shouldn't you be in the den resting?
Me? Look at you, you're a mess. What happened to you?
Gallant was unable to answer her when she was being so direct. He instead began to ask about his twin.
Has she woken up at all?
Junie wanted to push him for answers, though she knew it would do little good. Gallant was as stubborn as the days were long, and she knew how much Lovelorn had meant to him. Rather than ignore his concerns, she settled on reassuring him.
Yes, she's woken up a few times. She's in some pain, but she seems all right now.
That's good.
An awkward silence followed, and Gallant knew the questions wouldn't stop here. Bandit looked on worriedly, which Junie noticed immediately.
So, are you going to tell me what happened?
He was suddenly faced with the realization that with each member he told, he would be faced with the same heart-wrenching reaction. Telling them one by one would only prolong the agony. His family needed to know, and like a Band-Aid, he needed to rip it off all at once.
Where's Father?
He went out about an hour ago looking for the two of you.
He wanted to break it to them all at once, but he couldn't hold himself back any longer. The more he kept it in, the harder it was for him to breathe. If he waited any longer, he wasn't sure what the outcome would be.
Let's wake Love.
This was enough to cause alarm, though before his mother was able to speak, he continued.
We need to talk. All of us.
Junie only nodded, following her two sons inside the den. Moonlight subtly poured over Lovelorn, who was sleeping deeply. Gallant wanted this moment to last, if only a moment longer, before he ruined his sister's peaceful slumber. He dipped down, nudging her gently with the tip of his nose. She stirred, muscles tensing momentarily before her breath once again deepened. He nudged her again, this time with a little more force. It was enough to wake her as her eyes fluttered open and greeted him, easing at his presence.
Gallant, you're here.
Her tired voice burned his ears, and the guilt was crashing against every fiber of his being. She looked between her two siblings and her mother now, head tipping just the way Bandits had when he had noticed the wolf who was missing.
Where's Illicit?
Junie sat beside her daughter, the limp in her hind leg a reminder of the damage that had been done. Bandit sat on the other side of his sister, closing the gap between in search of comfort. Lovelorn could feel the tension, and she felt herself instantly tense.
Damn it.
Gallant muttered, once again lowering his gaze away from the eyes of his loved ones. He was on the verge of falling, the fear once again threatening his vocal cords. Junie, at seeing her son so distraught, attempted to ease him.
Son, calm down. Take a deep breath. Just tell us what's going on.
It's my fault. It's all my fault.
Your fault? What happened?
Gallant began pacing, the fevered pace of his steps stirring the dirt beneath.
Illicit, it's my fault.
Gallant, what happened to Illicit?
This time it was Lovelorn who spoke, her words rushed in panic.
I chased him down to the river. He was furious beyond restraint. I tried stopping him, but he wouldn't listen to reason. He just kept persisting. The storm picked up, but we were so caught up in our stupid argument we barely noticed.
He had to stop, catching the breath he so desperately needed. The wide, furrowed eyes of his family pushed him to continue, and he choked back the remainder of his guilt, needing the relief of release.
I was caught up in the flood. I didn't notice the log, the rush of water, his warning.
Lovelorn was driven to the edge with dread, the weight in her chest drowning her. Her mother and brother just sat in stunned silence, as though they were denying what Gallant was suggesting.
It should have been me. The log should have taken me with it. But Illicit.
So,
Bandit spoke, his words low and fearful.
he's dead?
This was the word the others could not speak, the word that held the heart of everyone in the room. Everyone's expression simultaneously darkened, and the grief had washed over the den like the rush of water that had so cruelly taken their fallen member. Gallant could only nod his confirmation, unable to say anything else. Junie broke out in sobs, falling to the floor of the den in a fit of hysterics. Even Bandit began to cry, his head falling to his chest as he forced his eyes shut. Gallant forced his gaze to his sister, only to find her eerily quiet. She only sat there, unmoving, her eyes glazed over in a way that made him believe that she had escaped to some far-off place. This unnerved him more than if she would have reacted with anger or devastation. He brought his muzzle nearer to the ground, regret in his tone.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
His mother only broke down all the more, burying her face into Bandit's side. Lovelorn, however, was still despondent. Gallant didn't know how to handle the situation. His mother had broken down, Bandit was barely holding himself together, and Love had been in such shock that she was frozen. Part of him wanted to run, leave, and forget that any of this had happened. Yet the other, more prominent part of him wanted to fall to the floor along with his mother and relieve the pain in his chest. Love's condition only worried him all the more, and her being so unresponsive was becoming hard to ignore. He took a timid step forward, trying to hold her gaze to his and lead her out of the darkness.
Love,
Silence.
Love, please talk to me. I know there's nothing I can say to make this better. I know that. But if I could go back and change things, you know I would.
Something he had said must have reached her, for the gloss of her eyes faded and narrowed as he spoke.
Where's his body?
Her tone bordered instability, and it took Gallant all of his strength to keep his attention on her.
I don't know. The river took it.
A sudden spark ignited in her, and her expression turned hard and callous.
If there isn't a body, how do you know he's dead?
Love, there's no way that...
You don't know that!
He was interrupted by the shrill of her voice. She sprung onto all fours, muscles tensing and claws working their way into the dirt. Bandit was startled by the outburst, turning his tearful expression to hers with eyes that resembled something similar to pity.
Did you look for him?
You know I did. I ran for miles before I collapsed. Nothing turned up.
I don't believe it!
Gallant just looked to her with pained eyes, not knowing what to say to her. Compassion erupted from the depths of his brother, who looked at Lovelorn with distress.
Love,
His words only angered her further, unable to deny the way he was pitying her.
I know this is hard.
Bandit continued.
We all feel his loss. You aren't alone in this.
At this, he peered down at their mother, who was still crying into him with trembling limbs.
So you're just gonna accept it? Just like that?
She snapped at her youngest brother, causing his ears to flatten against his skull.
Alyssa isn't like the rest of us. If anyone has a chance of making it out of something like that alive, it's him.
Gallant only sighed, shutting his eyes in an attempt to collect his thoughts.
You need to be reasonable.
He began, trying not to upset her any further.
None of us wanted this, but we can't change what happened.
Lovelorn felt herself losing control. It was foreign, and it engulfed her with such intensity that she could hardly control it.
None of us! You never liked him, Gallant, and you were never shy about letting him know it either.
This struck Gallant harder than he would have liked to admit, and the sting remained, despite his unwillingness to accept it.
So you think I wanted him dead? Is that what you think of me?
All I know is that he saved your life, and you couldn't even be bothered to find his body.
At this, Lovelorn sprinted forward out of the den and away from the clearing. Gallant could see the immediate terror that had befallen his brother as he sat comforting their distraught mother.
It's okay. I'll go get her.
But, Gallant, you haven't had any rest since...
This isn't a debate!
Gallant snapped in response, and Bandit knew that he had been just as mortified as he was.
I'm not losing anyone else! You stay here and take care of Mom.
Before Bandit could agree, Gallant turned on his heel, chasing after his sister who had wandered out into the darkness. Her scent was faint, and Gallant once again cursed his lack of smell. It didn't help that Lovelorn had always been the most agile of the group, and in his current state, he was lagging farther and farther behind. She would likely be heading for the river, and though he wasn't certain if she had known her way, he went there, his determination moving his weakened body.